Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's HDI webinar, Increasing Employee Satisfaction by Reducing Friction. Today's webinar is brought to you by LogMeIn. HDI is where service management and support professionals belong. You can connect with HDI on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and our members-only community, HDI Connect. I'm Roy Atkinson, HDI Senior Writer and Analyst, and we have just a few housekeeping announcements before you begin. If you are experiencing any technical problems with the presentation, please refresh your browser. It's absolutely the best thing you can do. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast, and they'll be answered during the Q&A session toward the end of the webcast. You can download the slides from today's presentation by opening the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen, and I can see that some people have already done that. Be sure to check out the links you'll find there as well. There will be an audience poll, and you can respond to that in the Vote tab by the presentation window. Remember that today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you'll receive an email reminder that it's available. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. With me today is Marie Russo, the Director of Product Marketing for LogMeIn's suite of support solutions. Marie has more than 15 years of marketing experience understanding contact center needs across a variety of industries, including high-tech, telecommunications, and financial services. And we'll be hearing from Marie a little bit later in the presentation. Right at the top of this presentation, we'd like to find out a little bit more about your knowledge or guesses about the industry. And I'm going to check you against the statistic that's from HDI. And I'm going to launch a poll right now. So go to the Votes tab on your window. And I will start the voting on this one. And the question is, on average, what fraction of the user base does not contact support? So out there in your organization, say you've got 1,000 end users, how many of them don't contact support on average? And I'm going to tell you what the industry average is when we're done voting. We have some good guessers and we're pretty evenly split. Some people might be picking more than one, I don't know. Let's see how close you can get to this one. And it absolutely has something to do with today's topic, I assure you. We'll give you about another 10 seconds or so. What fraction does not contact support? All right, we're going to close up the voting here. All right, we've stopped the voting. And now I will display this. And on average, you actually, about 43% of you got it right. About 1/3 does not contact support. According to our last industry survey, 64% of your users are those who do contact support, and that leaves just about 1/3. So you did very well on that. Good job. So what do we mean by friction when we say that, discuss friction in terms of employee satisfaction? Friction is the extra effort you have to exert to get something done, right? When you push something across the floor and there's a high degree of friction because it's a carpeted floor or a rough floor, it takes you more energy to get that done than if it were a smooth floor, right? And so friction is that extra effort that you have to apply to accomplish something. And so this absolutely applies in terms of any type of customer service, including technical support. Sometimes it takes customers extra effort. So let's look at some of the ways that that might happen. Let's say you've got separate service desks for applications and for different areas of your organization, and something happens in the user environment, and a person just isn't sure who to call. They have to think about it, or they have to ask about it, or they have to try several places to see if they can get help there. That's friction. It's extra effort if they don't know who to call. Waiting on hold or a queue for chat. Waiting on hold is always fun, right? Everybody loves waiting on hold. And if you have to sit in a queue for chat, waiting for a response or waiting for your chat to be picked up by an agent, that's friction. It's wasted time on the part of the user. Needing information you didn't know you needed. That's one of my favorites. When you finally do get through after waiting on hold or waiting in the queue, and they say, "Hi, what's your PIN number?" And I say, "I have absolutely no idea because I didn't know I needed a PIN number to get into this transaction." Being transferred and having to repeat everything. In some broad-based customer service surveys, 89% of people said that is one of the most annoying things that can possibly happen to them in terms of a customer service interaction of any kind. Having to repeat themselves over and over. What are you calling about? What's your name? What's your account number? All of those things that have to be verified or discussed before you get to your issue. That's all friction because it's all extra effort that you have to apply in order to get your issue addressed. It doesn't have anything to do with resolving your issue. And if you think about it, you're going to be able to come up with multiple ways that your users have to exert extra effort to clear a hurdle or to get to the point where they can finally say what their issue is and talk with a person who can actually resolve it for them. Waiting is not a good thing. So Forrester says that employees spend almost one-third of their time interacting with systems and applications. And as we move farther into the era of the knowledge worker, that percentage is going up. I don't know about you, but I spend almost all of my time interacting with systems online, on my computer, on my phone, on my tablet. I'm constantly doing things of a technical nature that involve systems and applications, right, all the time. And as support people, that's primarily what we do. We interact with applications and systems all day long. So when people run into friction or problems with this, it slows them down. When the agent is trying to find information that they can't find or not sure where to look, all of the same things that apply to customers apply to employees as well. If I don't know where to find the answer, how do I find out? Who has that knowledge? How do I know what system to go to get the information I know, or the form that I need to fill out, or and so forth and so on? When they can't access applications or systems, they can't work. And at least, even if they can work somewhat, they can't work efficiently and effectively. So the more friction you encounter, the longer it takes and the harder it is for you to get back to work, to actually accomplishing things. So while you're waiting for a screen to come up on your monitor, when you are waiting for a response from a database, when you're waiting for anything, you're experiencing friction because you're exerting more effort than you would normally have to in order to get that problem resolved. So the more responsive systems are and applications and the more readily available knowledge is to you, the better off you're going to be. True? I think so. That's the experience I have and have had in doing support and getting support both. And friction creates heat. This is, as you know, from physics, or from pushing that object across a rough floor. It has a tendency to get hot. If you rub your hands together, what happens? They warm up. And in terms of any kind of service environment, what that heat is customers getting frustrated and angry. Let me give you an example. I wrote a blog a little bit a while ago about this, and I called it Suffering in Silence, and why that one-third of your customers might not be calling you, and why people might stop asking for answers from you, if in terms of agents asking their leaders for answers, or why they have to do things a certain way. They might just stop asking. And this particular story it's a true one from my own experience, And it has to do with somebody who was going down the hall and happened to pass a printer with a little handwritten tag on it that said out of order. And they wondered if that had been reported to the service desk. So when they got back to their office, they contacted the service desk. It said, hey, did you know that this printer in this building is out of order? And in fact, the service desk did not know. Now, I know a lot of you have printer services, and so this may not directly apply to you, but carefully listen to the story and you'll see the point here. So now this person has a ticket in their name, to which they have to fill in details. They have to respond, and when the issue has been resolved, says the service desk, they ask for confirmation that it's been resolved, so now this person has to go check the printer and make sure that it's working okay, and then they get a survey to fill out. All they were doing was walking down the hall past the printer and happened to notice that it was out of order. All of that effort that was expended by them was all friction. Okay? How many times does that occur in your workday when you're trying to do something in your work environment and you notice something that isn't working right and you report it and now you're in charge of it? It becomes your problem. It becomes your issue instead of being collectively resolved, or one workaround for that particular issue that I just described might be that that ticket gets assigned directly back to the service desk, so it's their obligation to make sure that the printer is now working right, or to send someone from desktop support, whatever happens to be, whatever the workaround would be for that organization. So there are ways to eliminate friction, some of them technical, and we'll find out more about that later, some of them just procedural. How do we do things that generate more friction than we really want? And there's lots of ways. And why is employee satisfaction important and more important now than it used to be? Well, first of all, I was recently talking to someone at a conference I went to last week, one of our HDI conferences, and they said that they were having a great deal of trouble finding somebody to staff their service desk because of the job market in their area. In the technical sector, they had an unemployment rate of 1%. And so it's extremely difficult for them to find people to hire. The cost of turnover is enormous. It can cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to replace someone, not only in terms of the lost work if somebody leaves, but also in terms of hiring someone. The job search itself costs money. Paying someone's expenses to interview if that's the case, or paying employment agency fees or temporary staffing fees or whatever it takes to replace that person. The cost is enormous. And then the impact on the customer experience itself. So we know at HDI, because we've looked at the statistics for this, customer satisfaction is higher in organizations that have more employee satisfaction. So the year before last, we had 416 organizations out of our total sample that said that their employees were either satisfied or very satisfied. And in those 416 organizations with high or very high employee satisfaction, they had 5% higher customer satisfaction scores on average. And if you think about it in terms of the organizations in this industry, 5% is a very big difference. That's a difference between 86% customer satisfaction and 91% customer satisfaction. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to get from 86% to 91% if you know how customer satisfaction runs. And so it is increasingly important in these days of consumerization and the tremendous emphasis on the customer experience, and which also applies to our fellow employees. You have to make it better internally before that shows up externally. So as a support organization, it is very important for us to make sure that the customer experience or the employee experience for those who depend on us for support is as good as it can be. It should be seamless. It should be easy. It should be fast. And, of course, ultimately, the big goal is for us to eliminate the reasons that they might call, right? We said that a high percentage of their time, they're interacting with systems and applications. When those things fail, they have a bad experience, and they have to call in support in order to get it fixed. So if it never went down in the first place, that would be the best possible solution. That would be devoutly to be wished, in the words of Shakespeare. We would love it if things didn't break, but they do. So part of the idea here is to work with the other parts of your IT organization to try to improve the overall experience by preventing things from breaking, taking detailed notes on every customer interaction, feeding as much information into, if you have a problem management program, as possible so that permanent fixes can be applied and these things don't break in the first place. All of that elevates the employee experience to the extent that we can, and so we eliminate as much friction as possible from their environment. As I mentioned before, customers really don't like, and neither do employees, really don't like having to repeat themselves. And so you might start there. Start at the way that you respond to a phone call, to a chat, to an email, when you transfer to someone else, if there's another unit that has to address the issue, if you are escalating to, let's say, the network administrators or to level 2, desktop support, whoever you escalate to, that you provide that information to the best of your ability to eliminate as much of that friction as possible. So they don't have to go back over the issue. They might, the escalation group might want to gather some additional details, but if they have all of the information in front of them to begin with, there will be less repetition and less friction. The elimination of this extra effort is super important in the days of DevOps and the days of, as I like to describe it, when business is like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park when he's in the Jeep and the T-Rex is chasing them, and Jeff Goldblum is saying, must go faster, must go faster. Everything has to go faster now because speed is a competitive advantage. So your business wants to go fast. And so in order to go fast, one of the best ways is to eliminate the extra effort and extra time it takes for people to get any kind of issues addressed, whether that's your external customers or your internal customers and users who are your employees in your same organization. Get the friction down as far as possible and eliminate all the stumbling blocks that they have to try to get support. Provide them the information that they need. Make sure if you have multiple service desks, they know who to call in a particular instance. Make sure that you have self-service capability, or self-service capability apparently is what I was going to say. If you have a self-service portal or something like that, make sure that it's easy for them to understand, easy for them to use. Don't ask them questions they can't answer, like, is this an incident or a request? That's not their job. That's your job. All they have to know is something about what's broken or what they need to get addressed. So don't expect them to have information that they don't. Remember what I said before about that PIN number. Make sure that you are clear about what information they need to have when they look for assistance. So here's some of the ways that we have traditionally tried to reduce friction. Average speed to answer. We measure that because it's important to our customers how fast we respond, right? If we pick up the phone on the second ring every time or even on the first ring every time, that's terrific. We're cutting down on the amount of time that they have to wait. Time to respond to an email or to a web form or to any other method of contact. It's really important. Even in social media, organizations who do support or service through Twitter, for example, are expected to respond to a request within an hour, sometimes faster. Review your service level agreement. Is last year's SLA still good? Do people still agree with it? Did they agree in the first place? There's a lot of organizations that do, how shall I describe them, shotgun SLAs. Is where the IT department says, here's how fast we're going to respond. Take it or leave it. That's not really fair. It should be an agreement between the both parties, right? You have to talk to your customers, talk to your users, find out what they need in terms of your response. But review that periodically and say, is this still good? Do we need to change this to make sure that we're responding more quickly? Since we met SLA 90% of the time last year, maybe we can bump it up. So it will force us to think about how quickly we're doing things and how quickly people become available after a call or after a chat. Provide the channels that employees want to use. There's one organization that I'm very familiar with that didn't have chat, and they were doing some conversations with their users in terms of what channels those folks might want. And the manager level kept asking for chat. And it turned out that they liked to use chat because they could chat from a meeting and answer questions or give information over chat where they couldn't interrupt the meeting, walk out and make a phone call or answer their phone. So chat was a very good channel for them. The ticket volume in that particular organization, by the way, went up 30% when they instituted chat because people who hadn't been contacting them started contacting them because the friction was less. So it's very advantageous for you to have those conversations. Social collaborations. So if your organization isn't using Slack or a tool like that, or Yammer, there are some others out there that are constantly talking to each other and working on solutions for people, working on how to make things better all the time. That's one way that you can try to eliminate friction. And then there's the Dirtfoot method. Do it right the first time. So this is really the intent of measuring first contact resolution, is to make sure that it gets done right the first time. Unfortunately, what happens is that oftentimes organizations will make a metric a goal. We want to have 75% first contact resolution. And so what happens is that people are incentivized to resolve incidents that maybe aren't really resolved. They haven't checked back with the customer. They don't want to take the time. They just want to mark the ticket resolved because that counts in their favor. But you might want to think about really getting it right the first time, using the knowledge that you have, using your collaborative tools to talk to each other and make sure that you're getting it right the first time, that customer, that end user doesn't have to contact you back. You're not slowing down their job or interrupting their work. Get it right and get it right the first time. Take advantage of knowledge. Solve once, resolve many, right? You solve it once, you document that solution, you know how to fix it, make sure that everybody else in your organization knows how to fix it, and that they can contribute their knowledge into a knowledge base. We could talk a lot about knowledge management during this particular conversation, but I'll just say this. As you are aware, because you see it everywhere, automation is coming, artificial intelligence is coming. They're going to be part of our lives from now on. And one of the things that's absolutely necessary in order to feed automation, chatbots, artificial intelligence, any of the advanced technologies that are going to be coming into use, you have to have a basis in knowledge. You have to be able to feed information into those systems for them to work. And so knowledge management is of exceeding importance. Get in the habit of doing it. Get in the habit of sharing the knowledge. You're not any poorer if you share your knowledge, and in fact, your entire team gets richer because they can quickly resolve things that you've already figured out how to do, right? So take advantage of knowledge. Be empathetic. That's one thing that chatbots can't do, even though they may feign, oh, I'm sorry that happened. They may feign being empathetic, but you can really be empathetic. You can understand the urgency of a user. Take, for example, something that from my own personal background, again, that I'm very familiar with, a scientist is doing a grant, and the document that they're working on becomes corrupted. And then it's discovered that the backup is also corrupted. And millions of dollars may be riding on that grant. The next 5 years' worth of work may be riding on that grant. when they contact you for support, there's a sense of urgency. They need to get this fixed, and they need to get it fixed now. And, of course, everybody wants to get their issue addressed now, and you can't address all of them at the same time, obviously. But there is a sense of urgency that every user has, and that component has to be addressed. There's two things that you're solving. You're solving a technical problem for that end user, and you're solving an emotional problem for that end user because they're angry, frustrated, or hurt, or under a lot of pressure from their boss, or whatever it happens to be. So empathize with them and understand why that sense of urgency exists, and make sure that you take that on and have a sense of urgency about resolving that issue correctly the first time. And then use modern support tools to provide support and user guidance. If you can provide guidance for people to walk through and do things in whatever form that takes, and we'll learn more about that as this webinar goes on, I'm sure, use the best tools you can. Now, that doesn't mean that your organization is going to fund a ton of different widgets for you to use, but it should be making good choices to provide the best support possible to your users and provide them guidance of how to get things done and give you the tools you need to be able to walk your users through the things that they need to accomplish in the course of a day. So all of these different things, measuring the speed of things, providing the channels that employees want to use, getting it right the first time, taking advantage of knowledge that already exists in your organization, being empathetic and understanding a user's urgency, and using good tools to provide support are all really, really important in terms of eliminating friction that they feel, and they may get frustrated with you because of it. Eliminate that friction, increase the speed, and guess what? Life gets better for everybody, and when life gets better for everybody inside your organization, as I just said a slide or two ago, life gets better for people outside your organization, your company's end customers. The people your company serves feel that. If it happens on the inside, it's felt on the outside. It's amazing how that works, but if your employees are doing better inside and are happier at their jobs, your customers are going to feel that. They're going to sense it. They're going to know it by the way they're treated, and it's really, really important now in the days of customer experience focus. And now we're going to hear from Marie Russo. Take it away, Marie.
Thanks, Roy. Hi, folks. I'm Marie Russo. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for the Remote Support Solutions at LogMeIn. I loved Roy's presentation. It really made me feel like we've spent the last year focusing on the right things. So as you talked about employee satisfaction and how that ties into a higher customer satisfaction score, I totally believe that's relevant and true. Over the last year, we have spent a lot of time addressing the employee support industry and the user needs of that space specifically, and friction has become a common theme there, and how friction is leading to these really poor employee support experiences. So I want to carry that forward, that conversation, a little bit more and talk a little bit more about that. Let me just. So, in an effort, Roy mentioned this stat earlier, 30% of the average employee's time is spent interacting with all these different systems and reporting apps and knowledge repositories to get essentially nowhere in many situations. In an effort to simplify and increase productivity, we've only made it more complicated, and we've created this web of poorly integrated systems and tools, and we're forced to wrestle with them every day as employees. As a result, I think many of us go rogue and try to avoid that friction, and ultimately we end up pulling in our colleagues to help us remedy the problem with the printer or figure out the VPN, and all of this leads to lower productivity, lower employee satisfaction, and the effort that you can apply towards satisfying your customers. I think ultimately what we found is that the traditional technology and tools and processes just haven't evolved as fast as the expectations of our employees, who rely on IT to solve some of their toughest and not so tough tech issues fast so they can get back to their jobs. So let's talk about some of the trends that are continuing to shape employee support. You know, I think we talked about this, Roy talked about the need to go faster. Go fast, go fast. And we're conditioned that way in our consumer lives. So these digital-first businesses, they've changed our expectations. As employees, we're familiar with these well-designed user experiences throughout our personal lives. So think about Uber and that first experience you had when you opened an Uber app and hit your location and a car pulled up 2 minutes later right in front of you and said, "Hey, is that you, Roy? Great, climb in." And you didn't have to tip him. You didn't have to tell him where you were going in most situations. You just walked out the door to your destination. Ultimately, you had nothing to talk about when you arrived at your destination to meet your friends because you're like, "I didn't have a bad trip. I just got from point A to point B. Problem solved. No friction." So situations like that are shaping the expectations that we bring to work. We now expect our support interactions to be as lightweight and frictionless as those apps used in our consumer lives. At the same point, some of the technology advancements. So let's look at universal connectivity. You know, it adds to our lives so that we're always connected to the office, even when we're on a plane, for better or worse. You know, these types of applications, they're driven by these advancements in technology that are adding massive amounts of complexity into the support experience. And then the third trend is to consider how we actually work. Traditional workspaces are just giving way to a remote workforce in that gig economy. 34% of business leaders said that more than 50% of their full-time workforce would work remotely by 2020. Now, I don't want to give out my age, but I can remember starting out, there was no concept of ever working from home. And even when laptops became proliferate in your work experience, it was never the option to work from home. It was kind of like you were graced that luxury. Whereas today, that is far more the norm, and now businesses are driving that as an employee model. So it's really interesting there. And then 25% of those business leaders said that more than 3/4 would not work in a traditional office by 2020. So just the entire way that we work and is being completely changed by the modern workforce. And it has definite implications for how we deliver employee support today. And so when we think about how we support our employees, it just doesn't work when you look at some of these trends. Let's take, for example, like traditional remote support tools, the ones that are around today, they're all or nothing. You have to download a full package to solve even a simple issue, which leads to longer connection times and a more disruptive experience for your employee. And in response to this, we're finding that as a workaround, agents are often defaulting to online meeting tools that are easy to use and familiar to their employees, but they lack the functionality to get the job done. So the agent's job is twice as hard and it takes twice as long to do what could be done more efficiently with the right fit solution. In the end, this just leads to more employee friction and longer resolution times. And the third thing here is that just this lack of innovation in remote support has really led to a poor experience. The impact of this on your business can be significant. When it comes to employee experiences, if wasted time trying to connect to a session, it just leads to a lack of productivity, a low employee NPS score, and maybe some bad karma, but we won't go there. But I think ultimately the end result is it leads to more friction. And I think many of us are numb to it. We don't even see it anymore. We've been so conditioned to expect that I'm going to start downloading this bulky software package and then try and find it on my machine and then launch it, and then, what should be simple becomes really time-consuming and laborious. But if we can remove some of that friction, I think that we can deliver really transformative support experiences while also reducing some of our service delivery costs to our employees. But most remote support solutions just simply aren't up to the task, which is weird because technology's come so far, but so many of our remote support solutions are just stuck in a dial-up era. And customers have just been crying out for innovation on the fundamentals of remote support. And so that's what I'm excited to talk to you about today. We've really tried to break through with a fast and frictionless way of delivering remote support for our employees with the advent of Rescue Assist. So Rescue Assist is the next generation of remote support from LogMeIn. It is a web-based agent console that takes advantage of technology to make the support experience faster, better, simpler for both agents and end users. And it starts with frictionless connections, starting a session instantly. Let's just take a quick look. So as I said, this is a web-based console. It removes the friction points commonly associated with remote sessions. Now it's faster than ever to connect an agent to an employee, and it's easier for the employee to join a session, and it even performs better once it's connected. In fact, Rescue Assist can connect to an end user twice as fast as other remote support solutions. From pin generation to mouse wiggle, it only takes about 16 seconds for the agent to get control. And hey, if you don't need a control session, if it's not necessary, we can get instant access to lightweight options like chat, remote view, and file transfer in a jiffy. For employees, this has dramatically simplified the process by using a browser extension. There's no more searching those download folders and desktops for that pesky applet file. The second point of innovation is that we've said goodbye to desktop software. And so for the technician, this agent console has really created a modern and fresh interface. But we know looks aren't everything. So there are also no more software updates to manage. So agents are always be on the most up-to-date version of the platform. And it's also ready to plug into other LogMeIn applications or third-party CRM and ticketing systems. So we're not only reducing friction for your employees, but we're reducing friction for your internal IT help desk, which are also your employees. The third innovation point I'd like to bring up is an option for mobile support. With more and more people being remote employees, using a variety of mobile devices is becoming far more common. With our mobile support offering, you can do screen sharing for iOS devices and Chromebooks. These capabilities let you remotely view an iOS 11 or higher iPhone or iPad, and as well as remotely view Chromebooks. And we can also do remote view and control of your employees' Android devices for simple, performing regular tasks and resolving issues, just like you were there in person. And what I think is really, really cool is with just one tap, finally, with just one tap, our employees or service technicians can now show remote experts exactly what they're seeing through their mobile device's camera. Because it's browser-based, there's no need to download and install an app. So your employees just log in from any device, launch a session in seconds. This is great for your remote employees who maybe they have a printer at home or they're trying to connect their router and it's slowing them down. Camera share is just a really useful functionality, and we're excited that we've made it so frictionless and easy to get up and running quickly. The fourth point of innovation that I want to bring up is Slack integration. I know Roy pointed this out earlier in his presentation as a means to reduce friction. We were thinking this along the same lines, apparently. So as you see here, employees can reach out to you through chat in a Slack channel, and then you can easily start a remote control session in that Slack interface using our built-in /command /rescue without any installation. So, you can resolve issues faster and more fluidly without jumping from platform to platform, so your employees can get back to work faster with less interruption to their day. I don't know about you, but in our organization, Slack is definitely kind of overtaken email, I would even say, that employees are far more likely to collaborate in their Slack channel, to reach out for assistance by that way, and to really make it part of their main work space. And so we find that more and more organizations are bringing collaboration tools into that workspace, and we think that this is going to be a really slick way for them to provide frictionless support to their employee base. So again, I just wanted to highlight on a couple of things of what we're doing to help remove that friction in the employee experience with a lighter, faster, and better remote support experience. With a lightning fast connection time, you can get up and running into a chat session in no time, but into a remote control session in 16 seconds. I challenge you to go see what other remote support providers can provide. Run a test. Go take out a trial of our solution and give it a shot. We've also made, by being able to run sessions in your browser, we just eliminated that need for downloading desktop software for your technicians and maintaining that over time. Remote support for devices of iOS 11 and iOS 12. We know recently, I think earlier this year maybe, that Apple finally opened the kimono a little bit, not all the way, so nobody can do remote control of an Apple device, but the ability now to view those devices and help those end users with their mobile support needs is compelling. And then remote view from Chromebooks. This is something we hear time and time again from our customer base. So this is just a much needed feature as Chromebooks become more prevalent. And then easily transferring sessions among your devices, and then again, using that camera share without an application. Just really ways in which we believe we can help organizations to remove that friction from the employee experience in an effort to drive up employee productivity, employee satisfaction, and ultimately bring that back to more business growth for your organization. So with that, Roy, I'm going to toss it back to you for the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you so much, Marie. And we do have some questions here, so let's look and see what you want to know. This is a pretty basic one, I think. I assume the new tool requires real-time connection of customer and analyst. Is that so? I'm thinking that we don't provide 24/7 support. So there isn't a way for the tool itself to provide support off hours. Is that correct, Marie?
Correct, unless it's unattended machines, which we do support. Unattended access to machines. Yep.
So you can get at the machine if it's unattended. That's very good to know. I think that partially answers the person's question. Great, thank you. How widespread is the use of video for remote support? Why don't more organizations use it? Well, that's a very interesting question.
It is interesting. What's your take on it, Roy? Go ahead.
We don't have stats on video. We know that there aren't a lot of organizations using video as a primary support channel. There are some that are using video as not more of a self-help channel where they'll produce, like YouTube videos, 2-minute videos, 3-minute videos, how to use a new application or how to apply for something or that type of thing. but we don't see a lot of it being used for direct support. Maybe you can talk about how important that camera integration is.
Sure. It is definitely more of a discrete use case for camera support, camera share. Oftentimes we see it in organizations from a customer perspective, exactly. As organizations that look to support customers, we see it for like manufacturing organizations that like, hey, I'm on the manufacturing floor, I'm having a problem with this machine. Rather than send an expensive technician out there, we can have the person on the manufacturing floor video back into an expert technician and get some over the phone, over the video walkthrough of what might be going wrong, so they can troubleshoot without doing essentially a truck roll in that situation. And then as you think about these smaller businesses that maybe support freelancers or remote employees where they're still trying to set up an office space, or your IT center is primarily in your headquarters, but you've got all these field offices and your office admin doesn't have an IT resource there that can help them set up, whether it's routers or whatever kind of thing, all those different plugs. It's a way in which you can, again, provide some video support to see what the problem is without having to deploy someone to the site to fix it. So it's a faster way to get eyes on the situation, and it's a less expensive way to bring some technical expertise into the situation. Again, it's not a widespread use case like it is with remotely viewing your laptop. But we do see a fair amount of instance for it.
Great. Thank you, Marie. Here's kind of a general question. How important has the consumerization trend been to us? It feels like we're competing with Amazon and Apple in terms of user interactions and ease of use. Well, here's the news for you. You are.
You are.
That's what people have come to expect, right? They expect to have that real simple one-button push-it-and-it-happens interface that those organizations have pioneered and perfected. And I have some friends in the customer service realm who say things like, "You're not just competing with your competitors; you're competing with the last experience your customer had with any organization, and that includes those giants like Google, Apple, and Amazon." It has to be easy, it has to be quick, it has to be intuitive, and that's really, really important these days. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. We talk about that all the time. We are all conditioned by one click, swipe right, all of those small gestures to get what you want. It is, for our older generation who came up with the sad expectation or reality that things are a little slower and we're, as the consumer, we have to wait for support. There's a newer generation, these millennials and even younger than them who have always grown up with an app on their phone. So they have no they have no idea that the world should revolve any other way than what Amazon and Uber have created. And so it's interesting that I've always wondered what, even from an IT perspective, like internal, like a help desk, like what do younger employees who are coming into the workspace think of the tools that they're using to support employees today? Like, are they just like, is this a throwback? How is it that it's not like I'm the person who's supposed to provide the support, and my perception of these tools is they're not up to snuff. So I've always thought that would be a really interesting research study.
There's a very interesting cartoon that is a couple of years old now, but it's certainly appropriate to this conversation. If you use the big thing that starts with G and rhymes with Oogle, or the thing that starts with B and rhymes with ing, you can search on My Company's app, and it will probably bring up this cartoon. And it's basically, it says Google, and it has a bar, and it says there's a button on it that says search. There's one that says Apple, and it has a device that has one button on it. and then it says my company's app, and there's like 46 fields on it, social security number and your address and all these different choices that you have to make to use your company's app. It really is like that in a lot of cases, where it's over-engineered. To make things simple, by the way, like Google and Apple do, it takes a tremendous amount of work on the back end to simplify things like that. For that to work, it's an enormous amount of effort. So I'm sure that is also the case of your tools at LogMeIn. The simpler they are, the more difficult they are to engineer.
Yeah.
So,
it's considerable investment, I'm sure, into creating simplistic tools.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So, do you know if Rescue Assist can integrate with Microsoft Teams? And we have two questions about integrating with Microsoft products. Can you answer those?
So it's interesting you asked that. So out of the gate, we went with Slack, but I can't commit to a roadmap date. But yes, we are looking at additional collaboration tools to roll out fairly quickly.
Okay, great. We're planning to roll out live chat for IT support early in 2019. Do you have advice based on past experience for how to best plan for my team to be ready for a live chat support? Well, that's a topic. That's a whole topic into itself, and I don't want to get into it necessarily here today. There's some great advice on the HDI website. If you go to the thinkhdi.com and hover over the library icon in the top menu bar, and you'll drop down and you'll see Support World. And just go into Support World and search on chat, and there's lots and lots of advice on the kind of issues that people have run into and how they resolve them, so you might want to look at that. Here's one. Marie mentioned the NPS score. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Does it help us understand our customers better? Marie, do you want to talk about that? And I probably have a couple things to say as well.
Yeah, sure. I think Net Promoter Score has been around for a considerable amount of time and is kind of the default metric for measuring both customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 10. It's the ultimate question. How likely are you to recommend our product or service to a friend or colleague? And you rate it, where I think 8, 9, and 10 are a positive, and the middle band is neutral, and the 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 are detractors, and then you do a little math there to get your NPS. I'm sure Roy can have a much more scientific explanation, but it's a really simplistic, again, simplistic way in which to gauge how satisfied people are with you, and then the follow-up to that is, what is the reason for the score you just gave, where you can provide a little more qualitative understanding, or your survey taker can provide a little more qualitative understanding of why they gave that score. But it's been around for a number of years, and organizations like Harley-Davidson, like huge brand people, are true advocates of this model for measuring satisfaction. Roy, what's your? I'm sure you've got more you could add.
Yeah, NPS is a very interesting. It was very interesting to me when internal support organizations started using NPS. It was originally intended to determine customer loyalty. How likely would your customers would it be for your customers to recommend you to their friends? Was really the origin of NPS, and so it was for external customers, but internally based organizations started using NPS, modifying that question a little bit, as you said, friend or colleague. But it really goes back to the type of experience the customer had and how good they feel coming out of it. And as we know, customer experience is a huge thing these days. So the NPS has become pretty widespread. And actually, just to make sure that people get it correctly, it's usually scored 1 through 10. 9 and 10 are promoters, meaning they're folks who said, yes, I would recommend you. 7 and 8 are passives, so they kind of get taken out of the score. And then 1 through 6 are detractors. So they're people who would not recommend you to their friend or colleague. So you basically wind up subtracting the detractors from the promoters, and you wind up with your Net Promoter Score. There's good information on NPS online if you're not using the Net Promoter Score. it is one way to go at it. There's even a direct way. We talked a lot about friction today, and there's a way to kind of directly measure that, and that's called the customer effort score. And that's changed a little bit over the years. It's fairly new. It's only maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. And it basically asks the question, how hard was it for you to get your issue addressed? Or you could reverse that and say, how easy was it for you to get your issue addressed? It's either on a 5 or a 10-point scale. That's kind of optional, up to you. And the basic idea is to find out whether it's difficult for your customers and users to get their issues addressed. So that goes directly to the amount of friction. So you can look up CES or Customer Effort Score if you want to learn more about that one. It's also a very interesting way to look at your customer responses. So you might want to do that. Here's an interesting question. Why is it hard for our IT department to understand things from the customer perspective? It seems that we don't do a very good job of it. Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that. One of which is that support is the only part of the organization that generally takes customer responses directly. Some organizations have recently started instituting more satisfaction scores that go back to, let's say, the system administrators, or go back to the network administrators. If they resolve the ticket, they become the ones responsible for the customer satisfaction score, which is an interesting way to look at it. But in general, support organizations are the customer-facing folks, and therefore they have a better perspective on what the customers are asking for or talking about or complaining about than anybody else in IT does. And what really matters in terms of the IT understanding things from the customer perspective is that they have to be willing to sit down and listen to what support has to tell them. Support needs to report those things up somehow, and it really depends on your internal relationship with the rest of your IT department. So work on that. Try to get some attention on the things that matter to the customers, because it's really, really, really important. All right? So I think we have time for one more question. And here's a very direct and very simple one. Does Rescue Assist integrate with ServiceNow?
Yes.
Simple answer. Good. Good. Well, I love when there are simple questions and simple answers. Is there any one thing we can do to have the biggest impact on the kinds of friction you're talking about? There's not really one thing I can do from my perspective. Try to do some of those things that I talked about, and certainly that Marie talked about. Use the tools that have the lowest friction component, and try to eliminate the causes of friction from the user environment. That's the best you can do, and it's not any one thing. It's a whole combination of things. So that about brings us up to the close of our webinar today. Thank you, Marie, for all your hard work here and presenting to us.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Great. We look forward to seeing the rest of you on our next webinar, which takes place on Tuesday, November 13th. We'd love to see you there for sure, and hope you can join us then. And this webcast is copyright 2018 by United Business Media, LLC. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that's the case, by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of HDI, thanks for your time, and thank you to our sponsor for today, LogMeIn. Have a great week.
Take care.